The award of interest in international arbitration has become routine. If money is claimed, interest is sought to be added. Arbitrators invariably accept this request and add interest to the substantive amount awarded. However, there is no consensus on the method of awarding interest in international commercial arbitration. The tribunal will have to consider and determine the following four questions. 1. Whether the debtor is liable to pay interest. Second, the rate of interest to apply. Third, the starting point from which the interest has to be paid. And finally, the fourth point, whether interest should be compounded and if so, from what date. Most institutional rules of arbitration do not contain express provisions for the payment of interest.
Article 34.2, subparagraph B, subparagraph 2, speaks of the ground that award violates local public policy. This refers to public policy of the state, and therefore this may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, from state to state. Decisions under this ground are relatively consistent in establishing that public policy is narrow in scope and should only be applied in instances of the most serious procedural and substantive injustice. Public policy should refer to a fundamental principle of law or morality or justice of the state, or the most basic and explicit principles of justice and fairness, or the very foundations of public and economic life. Other violations of public policy may be found in cases of corruption, bribery, fraud, or serious procedural irregularities.
It is essential for the tribunal to establish a procedural timetable at the outset of the arbitration, which is to be recorded in the procedural order number 1. Most of the time, arbitration legislation does not address the contents of the procedural timetable for the arbitration. Such matter is left to the parties' agreement, or when the parties cannot agree on those matters, it is left to the tribunal's directions, except for the mandatory time limits set out in arbitration statutes. Also, very few arbitration agreements deal with the procedural timetables for the arbitration. Most institutional rules contain time limits for the parties' initial pleadings, such as replies and counterclaims, but do not specify the timing of any further submissions, so they need to be decided.